Welcome to The Green Urbanist, the podcast for urbanists fighting climate change. I'm Ross. Today's episode is a conversation with Liza Degtyareva. Liza is a business consultant, social innovator, and advocate for regenerative economy. She's a member of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership Network and has extensive experience working in several industries and countries as project manager and consultant. Today she runs her own business called 4D Sustainability, helping small and medium businesses on their sustainability journey. She and her co-founder developed a simplified methodology that enables small companies to adopt sustainability measures, as she believes that without small and medium enterprises on board, the transition to net zero and a better future will not be possible. The reason I wanted to have Liza on the podcast is because cities are not just made of physical infrastructure like buildings and roads, they are also economic hubs. And so if we want cities to achieve net zero emissions and improve on social issues, businesses of all sizes have to be part of that. We talk about why helping small and medium businesses across the world is so important and the huge role they can play. We also talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and why Liza uses these to structure her work with businesses. If you're not familiar with the goals, which are also called SDGs, don't worry, we explain them in the podcast. They are hugely relevant to cities as well as business and government. Really, we should all be making use of the goals and tracking our progress against them. And we talk about this later in the episode. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. I think it's really important that we learn from people who are involved in sustainability, but who aren't urbanists. I just think we need to get out of our little bubble sometimes and learn from other perspectives. So this episode has been a great chance to do that. As always, don't forget to subscribe or follow the podcast wherever you're listening. Please rate and review the podcast if you're using Apple Podcasts. You can follow The Green Urbanist and 4D Sustainability on social media. Check the podcast description for links to all of that. In terms of future episodes, I am recording a lot of interviews these days, so expect more fascinating guests over the coming weeks. And eventually I'll also get back to doing some solo episodes as well. For now, please enjoy this episode with Liza. Hello, Liza. Welcome to The Green Urbanist. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Ross. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited about this conversation.
My pleasure. So can you just kick us off? Tell us a bit about yourself and about your company, 4D Sustainability Canvas.
Sure. So my background is in business consulting, social innovation, project management, sustainability, quite a cocktail of things. So currently I'm the co-founder of 4D Sustainability, a company dedicated to make sustainability affordable and simple and kind of simplify the implementation of it into the strategy of small and medium-sized businesses and also startups and growing companies.
Cool.
So I worked pretty much in almost all continents. So I've worked in 5 countries, and among them in the UK until 2019. And that's where I first came into contact with social enterprises and community-based projects, as well as sustainability through the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership.
Okay.
And pretty much from that point, sustainability became really central to my purpose. And I decided to pursue it as a career as well. So our company is based in the UK and in Brazil, which there's a twist to it. But I currently operate it from my hometown, Budapest, Hungary.
Wow.
The reason we're so split with my co-founder, who is based in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, is because we met actually in a postgraduate program in Sao Paulo in 2019, organized by Amani Institute. And so this program was about social innovation management. As part of it, we had to develop a project. So we joined forces because we shared the same concern about, where the planet, the direction the planet is taking, climate change, and really all the intersection of problems that are related to injustice and all other social problems. And I personally was frustrated by the fact that the only way to achieve kind of the so-called, economic development is to actually degrade our ecosystems.
Right.
So it just seemed like if we wanted to close the gap between the developing and developed world, that the developing countries should follow the same path of growth, not really considering the way they're doing it. So we kind of narrowed down the problem. We started our research how we could kind of tackle it on our end, and what we found is that actually business play a huge role, and my background is in business, so I could see it from firsthand how it is happening. And we particularly were interested in the world of small and medium-sized companies, and I can expand on that later on. But what we found out is that there is actually a lack of access to tools, methodologies, and also resources, financial resources for these companies to be able to embed sustainability into their strategy, or even just think about it. So there are some really great initiatives in modern economy, like conscious capitalism or stakeholder capitalism, regenerative economy. Not sure if you've heard about them before, but they still seem to be a bit far from the mainstream and not known by most of the businesses. Right. So we were really looking into finding a solution to come up with some kind of process or framework that could be easily implemented in companies, and they could look at creating value through different lenses. That's how the 4D Sustainability Canvas was born. It's basically a visual representation of a sustainability from social environmental perspective. Okay. And it's a way of mapping a company's impact throughout the 4 dimensions of the canvas, which are community, employees, governance, and the planet.
Okay.
Yeah, and the canvas is also part of a 3-step process. So it's underpinned by 2 other steps, which we added to the framework, that are how to embed the Sustainable Development Goals into business strategy. That I can also explain later on what they are. Yeah. And how to make those findings, those opportunities and risks that we found as part of this assessment process into actions, so very actionable steps, and that is all recorded in a template that we call just the targets, like sustainability goals or targets template. We normally hold workshops. So that's how we work with companies. Most of them are either startups or NGOs, small agencies, even business schools, actually. So they started, introducing it in a business school in Portugal, in Lisbon. Wow. Yeah, and we also work with a lot of consultants because they are also looking to new ways of introducing sustainability to their clients. So I think it's a very handy way of starting the conversation and get all stakeholders under the same kind of umbrella.
That's great. I see so many parallels between what you say, about small and medium businesses and also urbanists and local government, in that, we say we want sustainability, we want to take action. And then when you take the next step of seeing, okay, what do I have to do? it's just like there's so much information, there's so many choices. It's very, very difficult to know where to start. So I think that's the real beauty of your approach, is sort of giving a structure to it,
Exactly.
bringing people along on a journey. It sounds like it's quite a collaborative exercise.
It is, and it's one of we call the uniqueness of our, about our framework is that we want to approach sustainability in a participatory or collaborative manner.
Right.
So it's not like a one-on-one conversation where we try to bring all the team together in one room, which is currently a virtual room.
Sure.
but
Yeah.
but the idea is really to create this ownership. So everyone takes part in the conversation. Everyone is shaping, the strategy of the business, which is, I think, beautiful. And I think, it's really much related to urban development when you involve the community, right? So, and the complexity is another thing. So there have been studies why companies are not taking on this path, and one of the reasons is because it's just too overwhelming for them. So even for a sustainability consultant, it's overwhelming. So you can imagine someone who is really new to the field.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about your approach to sustainability. It sounds like it's not just about carbon emissions, or it doesn't have that sort of narrow focus. You mentioned about, community involvement and a sort of engaged approach. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
It's not really my own invention, but sustainability is not really substantially is not about environment. I would say it's a more holistic and systemic view on how we think about our own, being or development in general, which involves our communities, our planet, and when it comes to business, obviously the employees. So how you treat your employees and how you showcase your commitment towards sustainability through your governance as a company. So it's much more holistic. And unfortunately, the social aspect of it is pretty overlooked at the moment, and I think it's getting better. Especially, it's getting more attention in the past years, especially as a result of of the crisis following the pandemic.
Right.
That you can see, that how like systemic issues actually shed light on social injustice or like just the lack, how lack of support by the government can push people to the edge, and companies. So there's so much more to sustainability. And I actually, if I could one day rename our company, that I would even use regeneration, which I think should be I would say pursued, because sustainability means no harm. Sustainability means I'm doing the bare minimum, just not to harm anyone. Regeneration is like a complete new way of thinking about how you produce, how you relate as a business. And the reason we don't use that is because it's still not a widely known term. So we hope to engage more companies through sustainability as it's more known, I would say.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we should be helping to popularize that term of regenerative business, having a regenerative mindset, that it's not only that you sort of cancel out what bad things you do, it's that you should be actively doing good in the world. Yeah, fantastic.
Exactly.
So coming back to this, your focus is on small and medium enterprises. Why focus on those types of businesses? what role do they have in tackling climate change, I guess?
Yeah. So I think one of the reasons small and medium-sized companies didn't get too much attention so far is because we don't look at them, in an aggregated way. So
Yeah.
even themselves, they see themselves as, separate. Their actions are not so meaningful compared to big corporations. But once you zoom out and look at data, you can see that they are actually the core drivers of economies. And in
Right.
some cases, they are actually producing up to 95% so they employ 95% of employees in
Wow.
certain economies or certain
Yeah.
countries. And globally, actually, they account for around 50% of GDP, so the gross domestic product. So when you see these numbers, then you understand, okay, so these, little players, they are
Yeah.
not so little. Just the same way,
Yeah.
as it applies to our individual actions. If you add up all the small individual actions, they actually, they are enormous. So just imagine for a moment if every small company put regeneration and or the circularity into the core of its mission. How big change is it would lead to. So, and it's
Yeah.
not only affects the company or the workers, but the communities, the customers or consumers. So it has a wider ripple effect. At the same time, SMEs, obviously, for the same reason, are also contributors to global, carbon emissions and
Yeah.
pollution. So, for example, they are contributing over 60, almost 70% of global pollution, and also because they are,
Wow.
mainly congregated in cities. So most of the
Okay.
small companies or small and medium-sized companies are in cities. And when it comes to the opportunity side of it, so looking at small and medium-sized businesses, they have this amazing capability because they are rooted in communities. They rely on their own, communities from the perspective, of the land and people. I think they are more likely to understand, the issues around
Right.
climate degradation or social injustice, etc. And also, their effect would affect their customers. Their impact, would affect their customers. So the it's like you don't really want to dig your own grave in a way,
Right.
so
Yeah.
you don't. Yeah, at the same time, for big companies it's easy to do because their supply chains are vast and they are far, and you do something in one part of the planet, sell on the other. Just you completely lose touch with
Yeah.
what's happening along that value chain. While these small companies, they see the tangible effects of it. And also, it's since they have this huge opportunity to contribute to something better. We thought it's a pity that the bigger consultancies or are not considering them as potential clients because they are not lucrative enough, right, for big
Yeah.
consultancies. So and yeah, I guess we just wanted to change that in a way that start the conversations with them and build this movement from the bottom up as much as from the top down, because the big corporates as well pushing down their agenda on small companies that are part of their value supply chains, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'm really getting a sense of the kind of ecosystem at play, because you sort of have a lot of small players who have a very vested interest in their locality
Hmm.
and probably can see the effects of climate change, the effects of pollution, and the effects of bad business practices, and they want to be doing something. But then there's that gap, as we mentioned earlier, between, knowing the problem, wanting to do something about it, and then what do I actually do?
Yeah.
So yeah, well, very well said. I had never really considered that, and also the fact that there's this, we hear zero carbon so much today. We're all these zero carbon targets, and the great beauty of that,
Hmm.
word zero, it means that we all have to help get there. We all have to get to zero emissions. It's not just Microsoft and Google and Walmart. It's every single person.
Yeah.
And so in a way that should be quite empowering, to say, oh, actually my little input does make a difference, because we all have to get there eventually. So
And if not even just considering the global trends that I call it now, because in a way the issue is the same as 5 years ago, but now it's finally geopolitics is getting it's just
right.
awakening to it as well. But sustainability is also good for your business. So it's not just about not doing harm because I want to be a good business, but it's also about there are some tangible benefits of running a sustainable business, whether it's you better relationship with your customers or increase brand loyalty or reputation. You can even have access to new market opportunities, have a kind of create the resilience that is so much
Yes.
needed now in times of such turbulence. And not to talk, not to mention the well-being
Right.
of your employees and how that affects the productivity and the innovation within your even in your company. So, and these are not just buzz words, but they've been researched and also supported by studies and
Yeah,
surveys.
absolutely.
So.
Um, okay, excellent. Well, I want to move on to another question, which was, obviously you've had a chance to work with a lot of different kinds of small companies.
Mhm.
Are there key things that all small and medium companies could be doing? Do you see sort of commonalities between them about how, let's say, if someone is listening who runs a small business, what are some of the first things they can start to do?
There's no like one size
Yeah.
fits all kind of solution. So when we talk about SMEs, the range is quite
Yes, true.
vast. So you can talk about a traditional manufacturing company to a high tech startup in I don't know, central London. So it's very that's why it's so complex. But something that is common, and the way we also start the conversation with our clients and the small companies is understanding the impact of your activity. So what we do normally is do a high level kind of like life cycle assessment, or like value chain analysis, where we see, okay, where you get your product services from, what do you do with them, and how do you distribute it. Basically just like just put it
Okay.
in a very simple way. But different companies or different industries will have different impact in different stages of its value chain. So for example, a clothing company or a more service focused, say a online market whatever company, will not have the same impact on the environment and its
Okay.
community. For example, a clothing company will have to focus on more the production side of it, the manufacturing side, the water use, obviously the condition of workers in the factory where it gets its supply from, how the water is, or the substances, the toxic substances are affecting the local rivers where they produce those the materials, and also about how they dispose the material, what happens with the clothes after you use them or the consumer use them. So I would say you look at industry data and you say, okay, this is where I need to focus on. This is where you start. While a service company will have relatively small environmental impact compared to
Sure.
production based or the manufacturing company. So they have a very similar approach, but they would not have necessarily the same linear, value chain. And so our clients have been predominantly service companies. And I would say what surprised them is, or that something that was a very common theme among them, is that they didn't really look into how they procure or how they purchase their own services, products that are necessary for so they could run their business. That can be from the from things like where you host your website, or how you run your platform, or to the point that how you actually commute to work as well. This is also an important part of it. Or the travel, for example, business travel can be quite a high impact activity for a service company. So this being, I would say, one of the commonalities, and also the way we started this conversation about sustainability. They are very surprised about. So I think most of the time about that social aspect. That the social sustainability is part of this whole thinking. And that they have to consider that at all. But also something that we experienced is that there have been lots of great things already happening in those companies that they actually didn't realize that that they fall into these sustainability categories. For example, how they handle their employees, that they have kind of safe space to check in on each other, or that they have some, training schemes in place for, continuous self-development, that their team is diverse, although sometimes it's not. I'm not saying it's not on purpose, but it's not, written in some kind of processes or
So it sounds like the sort of approach you would take would be similar, but then the outcomes could be quite different depending on what kind of business you are.
Yes, exactly.
So you mentioned earlier about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how you sort of use that in your work. I'd love to talk about this more. The UN SDGs, basically every country that's a member of the UN has signed up to these. But, the listeners may be forgiven if they haven't heard of them before, because many Western countries just don't feel like they apply to them or don't actually apply them in a meaningful way. Like, for instance, in the United Kingdom, I mean, there's lots of sustainable development goals related to cities, to sustainable cities, but you won't find them anywhere in our legislation or in our planning practice guidance or anything like that. So it's sort of missing, even though we are supposed to be doing them. So if you could tell us, first of all, what they are, just broadly, and then, how do you make use of them? Why are they useful?
The Sustainable Development Goals, or in other name, the 2030 Agenda, was, as you said correctly, adopted by all United Nations members in 2015, and it's like a shared roadmap or blueprint on how to create peace and prosperity for the people and the planet by 2030. So that sounds all lovely and fairy tale-ish, but really
Yes.
hard to grasp on our level. And what you mentioned, that you don't use it for urban development, actually, that surprised me a little bit, because I think UK is one of the countries where the SDGs are at least, known wider, as opposed to in some other countries where
Right.
no one heard of them, although they've been in place for
Yeah.
6 years already. But basically, it's the 17 goals are an urgent call for actions for governments, for societies, for the civic society, and for the private sector, to end poverty and other deprivations, improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, while also tackling the
Yeah.
climate change and preserve, our ecosystems like oceans and forests. Quite a bit of things to
Everything
do
is
at the
in
same
there.
time
Yeah.
and juggle. The hardship about the Sustainable Development Goals is that it's really sometimes hard to grasp on our
Right.
level of individuals or even companies. And one of the things we do actually for the sustainability is that we translated all the 17 goals to a more colloquial language, to a business language, so they could understand what they can do in order to contribute to each of these goals. And I think that's something that can be done to any industry, in any
Yeah.
industry or field. Other than that, I think what's important to mention about the Sustainable Development Goals is that it's really unprecedented that all the nations came together and decided that they join forces for something that is finally like a
Yeah.
global aim, and it's not just about let's help the
Yeah.
poor, but we're all good. But finally realizing that they are contributing, to many of those issues, and it's not possible to achieve without a joint action. And I think one of the flaw of the Sustainable Development Goals is that there are no goals that are take priority of others. So, for example, like SDG 14, which is life below water, or SDG 13, climate action, is kind of it doesn't take precedence to decent economic
Right.
growth, which is SDG 8, or sustainable cities and communities, which is SDG 11. So I think it's a super hard task, and a very ambitious goal, but and unlikely we're going to achieve it by 2030. But at least it's the fact that companies are talking about it, the fact that companies started reporting on them and using it as a language, a common language, to speak about their commitment, their achievements. They measure their contribution towards these SDGs is super important, and in that way it's a brilliant way of using this kind of visual these visual goals to be able to
Right.
compare companies and countries.
It's I mean, because it's so wide ranging, you almost have to pick and choose which ones are relevant to you, depending on your situation, don't you? So, there's ones that are very clear cut, like end hunger, and you think, well, as a small medium business, not sure how I can get involved in that, but maybe life on land within your supply chain, you might be able to have an impact on that. So Do you find you have to just focus on the ones that are most relevant?
There's no single way of approaching this. First of all, I think what we normally do is we look at the macro level first. So understanding where the country stands. So what are the priorities for the country? So how my business can actually, contribute to that. Because, as you said, as just as on a business level, similarly on country level, you will not have the same priorities as for example, developing country or a developed country, depending on the geographical location as well. So first thing is that we look at country data, and then we also, you pick those SDGs that your core business is the most related to. And then what we do is we don't pick SDGs, but we set actions, and then we link them to which SDG they relate to. So we chose this kind of reverse way of doing it, and not cherry picking, because then it means that actually, for example, setting diversity targets within your company, you actually contribute to reducing inequalities.
Yeah.
Or helping, helping with training programs in the companies. You may relate to quality education, which is SDG 4, I think. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so it's a very useful way of giving people a structure, giving organizations a structure to think about, what are our targets actually, and then you can just see these are here, almost pre-made targets. This is what we're all supposed to be working towards. Okay, great. Let's hang ourselves onto that, and figure out what we can do. It makes a lot of sense, and I think cities should be using this a lot more as well, because cities, and local authorities have a lot of influence over a lot of these things. It's quite a good scale, I think, for working on these things.
Definitely. And some cities are using it already.
Yes. Yeah, true. So how, what's the benefit of businesses integrating the SDGs? How do you sort of sell that to them in a way?
Yeah. So one reason is what I mentioned is a brilliant communication tool. So it's one of the most efficient ways of communicating your impact and your commitments towards sustainability. So, but not to point of abusing it, or not backing up with data and true measurement of the targets that you set in order to achieve the SDGs. But otherwise, it's very visual, and that's why companies like to use it. And we also understand it when we read their sustainability, statements and reports. On the other hand, there's a huge potential of market opportunities that are related to sustainable development goals. So apparently, by the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, so aligning business with SDGs could potentially unlock a $12 trillion market.
Wow.
Yeah. that means the different areas that you can tackle, whether it's agriculture, technology, carbon capturing, etc., that you can tap into as a business. So that's the 12 trillion market, but also all the efficiency that comes with introducing sustainable processes, or eliminating waste from your production that is also costly, right? So that's why actually over 9,000 companies worldwide signed up to the principles of the UN Global Compact, which is one of the bodies that is at the forefront and uniting business towards achieving the SDGs. And yeah, so basically, the opportunity is huge, and you can see more and more startups actually that are entering into the field that trying to leverage, these business opportunities that come with, come through the global goals and business sustainability and sustainable development. Yeah.
Excellent. Wow, that's really it's a really good argument. It's very convincing, isn't it? Is this idea of, wouldn't you want your business to be able to go on forever and contribute, to be a sustainable business means you can keep going. No one wants an unsustainable business that will just, run out of resources at some point.
Well, you can always find companies who are trying to still kind of close their eyes and say,
Yes.
"Yeah, we're fine. We're fine for
Yes.
5 more years."
Deny the evidence. You mentioned earlier about you want to see how countries are doing against the UN SDGs. Mm-hmm. Where is that data accessible?
It's called SDG Index. So there you can see up-to-date report on the progress of the 17 goals of each country. I think they update it yearly. And also Eurostat for European countries have also some very up-to-date and useful data. And they actually broke it down to target level, so it's even more accurate.
Yeah, I suppose we should say to people as well that there's the 17 goals, and then underneath that there are targets?
171 targets, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So it does get quite specific.
Yeah, and it should be specific because otherwise, companies and governments start using those flashy icons, but without any substance to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I'll put a link to those websites in the podcast description so people can go and check out how their country is doing.
Sure.
You might actually be surprised. I mean, I had a look at a few different countries, and you might be surprised how some countries are really underperforming on certain things, and others doing quite well on other things. So it's really good. You shouldn't let your preconceptions, I guess, get in the way. You should have a look at the data.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I think the UK slipped down.
There is, well, actually, it's true. There are a lot of Western countries now slipping down on the social aspects because of, we've had a couple of bumpy years with regards to politics in across Europe and in the US. So
yeah,
it's not always linear, the progress. Sometimes there's setbacks. So there's a final question that I'd like to ask all the guests, which is basically that, we're now in a critical period for action on climate change. We only have a few decades to really, make a real difference, to achieve net zero, to address, ecological collapse, all these various things that we've been talking about, as well as the social aspects, of course. So from your perspective, what do you think needs to happen over the coming decades? What would you like to see happening?
I think in a way I answered it at the start of our conversation, the reason why we started the 4D sustainability, which is about challenging, and what the donut economy is about, or the sustainable development goals, is predominantly challenging our, economic system and the way we think about, money, the role of business. So I think changing that mindset, that culture, will be key. Will be key for a fast and efficient transition. But to be more specific, I think it would be inevitable to put price on carbon and degradation. The extraction and burning fossil fuels, reforestation, the melt of permafrost, degradation of topsoil by mass agriculture they should be priced, And if you measured the cost of capital in with true value, so including the price of that degradation, that it would turn out that they are actually not so profitable anymore.
Right.
And these things are actually key drivers of business decision making, and they send, like, not considering these things, they send really unhelpful signals to companies and economies.
Yeah.
I think this is really crucial to do that. On one hand, on the other hand, I think obviously, I think this is also part of the conversation, how you measure the GDP, etc. So I think it's all part of that same bundle, and closing the quality gap.
Yeah.
But I could rant about all the issues and how we could solve them. But that's also huge, and I think a little bit underestimated.
Okay.
Because just to kind of come up with some numbers, like around 50% of global carbon emissions are generated only by 11% of people.
Really? Oh my God. It's just mind blowing, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. So, and not to mention the equality, the income, the disproportion of, where income is, accumulated, which is like 57% of global income is in the hands of 10% of people.
Yeah.
So all these things would mean that, we need to when we head towards sustainable development, and we do the transition towards net zero, or net zero countries and economies, we should not punish more people who are on the least advantageous side of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just coming back to your comment on carbon pricing and putting a price on degradation. I mean, the step before that is, like, countries need to stop incentivizing destructive behavior, because globally countries incentivize fossil fuel extraction with trillions of dollars, and incentivize the airline industries while not giving the same sort of funding to local public transport and things like that. So there's a whole system of incentives happening at a high level that are just totally counterproductive.
Exactly. And you actually just read my mind about my third point, which is, the finance, how you finance things plays a crucial role in this. So the formula is easy, where the money goes, that, those markets will flourish. And it's, until the banking sector and big asset management groups don't, shift focus, the change will not be seen. But it is happening as well. So you can see more and more. I can also name a few examples, but fortunately the shift is happening even from there have been some big initiatives in the UK recently, and commitments from the governor of Bank of England. So that green finance is going to overtake slowly traditional finance. So
excellent. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. Before we go, where can people find you online, learn more about your company?
Yes, so you can visit us on www.sustainability-canvas.com. The site is in both English and Portuguese for the Brazilian community.
Great.
Otherwise, we can be found on social media, LinkedIn for the Sustainability Canvas, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And from our website, you can also subscribe to our newsletter that I send out on a monthly basis about upcoming workshops, or just general business sustainability content.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure was mine.